Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Today, I am privileged to introduce you to two amazing guests. Before I do that, here's one of my favorite quotes of all time. Out of every 100 men, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets. 9 are the real fighters. And we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle. Ah, but the one is a warrior, and he will bring the others back. Heraclitus. 1 in a million chance for all you listeners today that I have not one, but two warriors on the Culture Matters podcast. Returning guests weighing in at, no, I'm just kidding, episode 224, season 19. Ken Jordan and Joseph Iredell are back again to talk all things necessary and vital for this time in our culture and our business and our life. I'll say some more. Ken's a friend of Culture Matters for a long, long time. I mean, early supporter of 30 Days of Thought, which many of you listening may not even know what that even is. But it was a book that was published years ago by myself and the team, and has been a friend ever since. He helps people achieve their American dream, their American gift. And Joseph, his roommate, I believe from college, is one of the most talented salespeople. Apparently, I never knew about, and I believe that. A great interviewer. I've been on their podcast, Selling the Dream. That's what led to all this craziness, and has a very successful business working with only those that make sense to work with for someone on his level. And we can unpack that. And man, I'm so glad to have you guys back. It never feels like work when I'm talking to you guys. But I picked that quote because I really wanted your opinions on it. Among it being one of my favorites. And if you want me to repeat it, I can repeat it because it's kind of long. But thanks for coming back, guys.
Pleasure to be here, man.
I love that quote, man.
That's a great quote. And real quick, if you haven't, you can still get your copy of 30 Days of Thought. I highly recommend it. It's a great book, great for reflection. Little plug. Absolutely, it's a good book. So
it is in print, believe it or not. And this was before Chat GPT. So I did write it.
You wrote the whole thing. Oh, yeah, I know.
Nice.
No, let's have some fun today. I always like hanging out with you, Jay, because your motor is 90, 150 miles an hour all the time. And if you're not, you got to, pull the car over or, have a seat, because if you're just kind of listening to this episode, doing something else, you're going to miss a lot. So we're going to move fast, I think.
The quote, right? I'm going to repeat it just because I want your guys unpacking this. Out of every 100 men, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets. 9 are the real fighters. And we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle. Ah, but the one is a warrior, and he will bring the others back. Where do we start?
Which one are you, Joe?
Bro, I like to believe that I'm one, dude. I'm one. And I don't think that you are born one. I think you can become one. And it takes conscious thought to do that. And it takes observation of the other 10. And then and just realizing where you are in the hierarchy and what you need to do to become either the 10 or the 1. And then when you are the 10, you look around at the other 10, you say, how can I help these guys do better? And then you become the 1. So I love that, because it's not about that one warrior. It's not about him, like that you become that warrior, because when you are the elite 10, you decide that you're going to help the other 9, and you're going to protect the rest that can't be protected. And that makes you the 1. So
I think that's 100% true. I think that that you become the 1 when you make a decision, and usually in my opinion, usually out of love, you make a decision that you're just gonna, you're willing to risk it. and you're willing to risk it for the people that you're eager to protect. And I love that you use the word protect, because I think that it is a primal instinct of the warrior to want to protect. And what I love is that, you know, the warrior lives inside of all of us. And you know, if you've ever read the Four Agreements, Jay,
Yeah, that's great.
the voices are the child, the warrior, the judge, and the victim. And it's the warrior that often rarely gets the opportunity to speak. The warrior comes and shows up in your inner dialogue to protect you from, you know, when you're feeling down, when you're feeling defeated, when you're feeling like you don't have what it takes, when you're feeling like the world's against you. It's that voice of the warrior that's gonna change the reality for you. And I think that the one in this quote is the person who allows that voice to be the loudest most frequently.
I believe that you get to a point where you're operating at a high level that it almost becomes like a clandestine thing where you realize like you're not chosen, but it's almost you're obligated because you've been blessed with these skill set and this awareness, and you know that you start to notice that you're doing things a little bit easier than other people and doing things a little bit better, and you know, and then it almost becomes an obligation that you have to like, all right, well, and we had back when we were at Yellow Book, and I'll never forget this, Joe Walsh had a saying, he said, leave the ladder down. So you always have to leave the ladder down, that when you're ascending to these great things and high level, like don't forget that you were not at the top in the beginning and someone left the ladder down so you can get up there too. So that's where that one comes in, where you know you start to realize you're not competing with the other 9. You're there. And then it's like, all right, well, now I've been blessed with this opportunity. I have this skill set, and you know, I've been given these divine tools to be able to lead, to be able to protect, to be able to do all these things. And now it's like, if I don't do that, I'm basically pissing on everything that's brought me to this point and everyone who's got me here. So it's almost becomes like a burden, if you will, to like, dude, I gotta step up. I gotta be the one.
A responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
How about, okay, Jay, I have another
please.
thought on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So can you coexist in different spaces of your life and be in some areas of your life the one, and in some areas of your life be part of the 10 that shouldn't even be here? Is there a progression through certain journeys in your life where, yeah, there's gonna come a time where you're like, you probably shouldn't even be in the room, but you got to get through that first before you can ascend through the hierarchy in that analogy?
I think that in order to get to that level, you have to be a servant of other people, right? So like you have to change your mindset that I'm not going to go dominate. I'm not beating everyone. I'm helping everyone. So there are different, it basically grounds you so much where you start to be aware of these things where you have, and I say this with with new hires and companies and things like that, or someone who's struggling where you're like, well, this person might not be the best for this job. And like everybody, you know, I think we talked about on the last podcast, like we'd have these boiler room style sales, and like the guy who sucks at it, all these wolves in there, like, oh, this guy's a piece of shit, like whatever, he's not staying till 10 o'clock, he's going home to take care of his kids, like, you know, that guy's a loser. But like, meanwhile, this dude could probably be like a rocket scientist somewhere else. And all these guys are idiots. So like, when you realize that you possess a certain skill set in certain situations that might put you above other people, then in the grand scheme of things, when you understand where your role is in that skill set, as opposed to other people's expertise, that actually elevates you.
You can become the warrior in that space.
Well, no, it's not just in that. It's then then you become again like the delegator, because out of the 10, right, you might be the baddest, just fighting analogy. You might be the best striker, but there's a jujitsu guy who's gonna like whoop your ass, right? So like you're not going to, that doesn't make you better than them. That makes you realize like if we're going into a situation and we need this skill set deployed, then because you're the one, you can say, okay, like here, this is our guy for this. This is how we deploy these assets. All the while having more of an overview, a holistic kind of approach to achieving the task. And that's where it becomes you're a servant. You're actually, how do I help these people and how do I fit these round holes in these square peg or whatever that expression is? But like
find the round hole for the round peg.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the whole idea of being that one. It's not about your individual skill sets. It's about us like seeing the potential in everyone around you and making everybody stronger.
And he will bring others back. Is that what like that piece? What can we just pinpoint on that?
He'll bring others back. So that there are in this analogy, there's going to be casualties, but there will be people that survive because of the warrior, because of the one, because of and it could be for a number of reasons. It could be because of a decision that was made, a tactical decision, and you can certainly apply this to business. From a leadership perspective, it could be a tactical decision. It could be a sacrifice that the warrior makes. It could be just pure inspiration to inspire someone to take action when they otherwise would not have, if not for the inspiration of the warrior. And I think that those are situations where those folks will absolutely have survived, whether it's a market downturn or a startup with facing adversity, or a restructuring of leadership in a company. It'll be the warrior that brings certain people along, and there will be casualties, but there will be people that are in their position, in their place, alive because of the warrior, and I think that's what that alludes to.
How do we discern between the 10 that shouldn't even be there and 80 that are just targets?
The 10 that shouldn't even be there is what do they call that? The unconscious incompetent, right? They don't know they suck. They don't know that they suck, and they don't know why they suck, right? But then there's going to be the targets. They suck, and they know exactly why they suck, right? So I think that there's just more of those people. I think that's how I would differentiate between the 10 that shouldn't be here and
wait. So everyone doesn't get a trophy, and you're
no, I don't. I think you're missing. I think the 10 are the detractors and the people who are the subversive, negative influences that aren't
interesting.
But they're not overtly negative. They're the most dangerous people in the world. These are the people who they could be your family, they could be your friends that will, support you, but not, and I don't mean like behind your back do stuff or trip you up, but like give you false information. So that's the most dangerous situation.
So toxic people in the workplace, gossip.
Yeah, like worse than that though, because people that are just bad, like that have ulterior motives when they're trying to like guide you or give you advice. So they're the ones, it's like the wolf in sheep's clothing. So those 10 are the ones that you're like, oh, this is my boy. Like, cool, he's going to help. Like he's giving me sound advice.
So how do you discern then? How do you discern?
It's a matter of, it takes years to build trust and seconds to break it situation. And the second that, that one of those boundaries or something gets broke, you just have to cut those people out and run for the hills. And that's why they don't need to be there. They can't be there. So the other ones, the bulk of them who are targets, they're people that I think more fit into your assessment of the 10, where they don't know, they're just idiots, right? Like they're just kind of going through life. They're simple and, they're going to take bullets. We're going to push them on the front line and God bless them, but like you're for real. And, using that analogy, but like at least they're not doing things out of a nefarious intention. where the 10 are. The 10, they're trying to, they've infiltrated from behind the enemy lines, and they're trying to tear you down. And they're the ones that shouldn't even be there, and they're the ones that you need to cut off immediately. And you know, people
If you
will go
find 'em.
back and forth, and it's so fluid and so dynamic because every situation and every aspect of your life is different with these different types of people. So one person could be fall in that 10 category when it comes to your personal relationships, but they could be a warrior in your business. So then it's like, all right, well, shit, like, how do I compartmentalize this person? And again, like, this is what becoming the one is. It's a constant reassessment of the other people around you. And again, like what their skill sets are, how you can help them. And, you know, maybe a guy who's a 10 doesn't, maybe they're unconscious about being a dick. And like, you just have to have a uncomfortable conversation with them and say, listen, this is how I call you out on this. You're never going to be one of the 10, but like, don't be over here where you're going to get cut off. So that's the other thing about being, you know, a good leader, a good warrior is it's like you have to be comfortable with having tough conversations, and you have to address stuff, but you're not allowed permission to be that way unless you're on the other side of helping. So like everything that I've noticed in recent years is like there is a yin and a yang, a balance to everything. So if you're going to be, you know, a hard charging ass kicker over here, you better be the most gentle, calmest person, you know, when it comes to other things over here. Because otherwise you're out of whack, and people will only see you one way or the other. And it's like that's where you're allowed that permission to have tough conversations, because they know that it's coming. This is another great expression that it's coming from love, not for love. And so when you look at that perspective, like, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I want people to adore on me and say, oh, he's such a great guy, that's why I do this? Or are you doing this because it's like, this is the right thing to do, and it's coming from my heart, and I want to help people because it's internally me helping, and I don't care about the accolades. I don't care about, you know, what, like, the recognition for it. So that's where the balance comes in between getting those people to the, you know, in and out. But
9 are the real fighters, and we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle.
that's my ride or dies, man. That's my KJs of the world right there. Let's go.
That's the people when you know you're in the shit, you don't mind being in the shit because you're with your 9. You know what I mean? And it's like it's almost as if the struggle is worthy of you because they're going through it too, and you guys are just like Joe said, ride or die, but like you're just all in the mix, getting after it, good things, bad things, but the camaraderie that comes from being part of the 9 is special. If you're lucky enough to at some point in your life, God bless you if you actually have 9 of them, but through the journey of life, if you're lucky enough to have a handful of people that you would categorize as the people that are in your quote unquote your 9, you're lucky. You're in a great spot, and it makes the fight worth fighting, and it makes, you know, the journey that much more fun, for lack of a better word.
I was watching I think it was Patrick Bet David on Dropping Bombs, and he talked about Steven Schwartzman, the Black, I think it's Black Stone. I don't know. It's hard. I always get that mixed up with Black Rock.
Blackstone, yeah.
The private equity guy talking about compensating his executives, like the people taking on the lion's share of, you know, the organization. And it was something to the effect like who they are matters, to Joe's point earlier, like about character, you know, buy in, not buy it, bought in, not bought in, and compensation being so important, like pay them well if they're the one. And then this other piece about I think it was Jamie Dimon that said 110 is worth 28. that either came from Jamie or it came from Patrick on Steven, and I just crossed my wires because I'm a fan of all these. But I would like your thoughts on that guy. Like, what, that was a big statement to me. And it makes me think about this quote: 110 is worth 28. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you see it a different way? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I'll use the like the tornado ranking system. Like a category 5 tornado is not 20% more destructive than a category 4. Like, to go from 4 to 5 is exponentially more destructive, right? So I think when you're ranking the talent or and it's hard to say, to quantify the quality of a person that you're working with, but an 8 and a 10, they're not just 20% better than that 8. They are exponentially better than, it's harder to get to 8 than it is to 7, and and so on and so forth. Like, it's not a linear curve, it's a hyperbolic curve. And I think that's why that you could justify that the 10 is worth what do you say, 110
28 is huge.
I mean, that's a big number. That's a big number, but it all depends on what you're looking at that 10 to do for you.
I don't know. Back when I was single, I might have a different opinion. Yes.
Oh,
that was like 102s.
Yeah, that was a lay down. Yeah, that was a lay down.
Yeah, I don't know.
Unintended, I guess. Damn.
Listen, I went to college with Joe. He definitely does not agree with that.
Wow. So yeah, I guess
there was a sliding scale.
1,002s. I'm all right.
Rated on a curve.
God, this culture matters has digressed, but that's okay. It's all cultures are welcome here, guys. Oh. I'd like, what do you, the sentiment, right? So the real fight, how I'm visualizing this is the real fighters, for they make the battle, some kind of relationship between the targets and the real fighters is going on. Not quite clear to me what it is.
No, I interpret that as, they make the battle because they're the ones engaging, right? So if you have 10 guys, like, let's split them up. So their team has 100, we have 100, right? So 80 are going to sit around, not do shit. The 10 that are the detractors, they're going to say why we're the worst and we're going to lose. And they're going to give false information. And they're the ones, we said. But the other 10, these are the guys who are ready. They're the ones that are charging. They're like, let's go, let's do this. So they'll lead the others because they're the ones that are ready to fight. So there is another quote that it's from a movie, but it rains. So like, I heard it. When I train, what I do, and I'm like, there's guys who are there recreationally. There's guys who are, like on the path of being professional and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, but this quote was, I think it was Full Metal Jacket. They're like, if you look at our military, there are like 98%, or I won't use percentages because it makes it tricky, right? So like, some people join the military because of tradition, like their grandfather was in it and so forth, and they're from a town and there's a lot of that. So some people will join the Marines because of that. The other portion will join the Marines because they have some sense of patriotism, or in an event like a 9/11, like, let's get out here, I'm going to fight for my country. Then there's like a slim, like less than 1% or 1% who join the military because they're psychopaths and they want to kill people. So like,
that's so crazy. Oh, that makes sense though.
Think about it though, statistically, like there's definitely people that have that scratch that itch. So it's funny because like when we talk about
the desire to kill people, Joe just qualified as an itch.
I don't know.
I mean, it's a very dark but very deep.
Think about it. So like so when we're talking war, so you can't not talk about like war and warriors or really anything that like that when you're using these sample sizes, and not think that there's, of those 10 guys, right? Like one of those guys is he just wants to murder everybody, dude, because that's why he signed up.
All right, I want to add something.
Warrior.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Finish your 10. So I always think about that.
What about this alliteration? What you just said, the tradition, the patriot, and the psychopath. That make on a business context, I'm thinking tradition, second generation on like second generation entrepreneur, right? Parents started the business. Patriot, I'm sick of working for the man. Like, let's go out and do this. Psychopath. There's that founder. I don't that secret sauce. Like
They have that. There's an
have it.
innate thing that just burns. It's like I don't want a job. I don't want a business. I want to take over the world with this thing.
Yeah, like a Steve Jobs or something.
Yeah, like this isn't about, and it doesn't. It's like you can't teach that or whatever, but it's a burning, just all encompassing type of thing that's in certain people. And it's not just like entrepreneurialism or, murdering people or like whatever, but everybody has something like that in them that drives like to such a degree. And I think that a major thing when we're talking about, the warriors, right? It's like, it doesn't have to be war. Obviously it's a metaphor, but like whatever that is, you can be the warrior in that aspect of like what you are into. And if you can figure out like what gets me up in the morning and what drives me to be that warrior, then you're the warrior. So like for I think the most admirable thing to be a warrior is to be a good father, a good husband, to raise kids, like to do things like that, be a good member of your community. It doesn't have to be attached to a quantitative goal, like I'm going to make $1 million. I want to grow this business, or I want to be the best lawyer in my firm or whatever. Like that's all well and good. But like, things that are altruistic and good, everybody can do it. And it's like, the old test, like you put the shopping cart back at the grocery store. Do you hold doors for people? Do you look people in the eye? Are you on time? Are you, like all these little things that like you can change today. You don't have to have any skill or any training to be a better person and take you from the 80 to the 10. And then once you start to recognize in other people, when you're the 10, then you can help them get better. And that makes you become the 1. So it's not a linear path with like business or fitness or like anything like that. It can be whatever drives you and whatever is important to you.
I think I should add to this conversation for the audience, you guys in the audience, if you don't know, Heraclitus was a Greek philosopher, 535 BC to 475 BC. And he did train warriors, as far as I know, he's like a philosopher's philosopher. A lot of the great thinkers have studied him. So I wonder, it makes me think of that 80-20 rule, like how much impact we can make on that 10, 80, 9, 1. Is it set in stone? Should we always be looking for it? And then how do we relate to each level? But yeah, so I'm just throwing that out there. Like there's got to be something. There could be something to this. It's like gravity. Every 100 men, a percentage won't be bought in, or a percentage are going to be saying, "Where do we go?" A percentage are going to be all in, and like, can we keep them? Right? Can we lead them? So I'm curious what you guys think about that. Like with more context, this guy was one of the more brilliant people in the world, and he was learning by doing too, right? In the trenches, working with men, and came up with this idea. So what are your thoughts?
Jay, I wish you should ask Greg Offner this. I'm halfway through his
sweet.
because he talks about the his analogy is a piano bar as opposed to war, but there are when you're working a crowd or when you're running an organization, you have certain people that are engaged, certain people that are disengaged, and certain people that are just your core group of people that are bring the energy and all that stuff. But I think that working backwards from the 1, as the responsibility not just to bring people home, you also are constantly looking for ways to elevate the people that are in your organization. And he talks about providing a better experience, better work experience And I think that, you know, if you can decide who the what do you say, sleepers, keepers, and leapers, I think was one of the.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah,
remember
that's
that?
in the book. Yeah, the tip jar culture.
Yeah. You know, you got your keepers, you know, that's your 9, and you got your sleepers, and you got to decide what to do with them. Do you keep them? Do you try and wake them up? Or do you know they're not going to be around and you let them go? And then you got the leapers, and these are effective people. They're just not going to be in your life for very long, and that's okay, you know. I think that the ability to identify those characteristics is in this analogy, I think is
Wow.
crucial.
Well, I want to throw something out there for you. And Joe, if you didn't read the book yet, I can elaborate a little bit. Or the sleepers, okay, these are people that are essentially disengaged. And I think he was making an argument in the book how the pianist, I said pianist, not
Caught that.
Hard T. That was a hard T.
I thought
No,
you had-
I want to
thought
clarify.
you developed a lisp for a second.
I said, well, I said bar, you know, I don't know if you're listening. Oh shit, I just hit my drink over. So the sleepers, I think he's making an argument that how the pianist said it interacts with the sleepers has a relationship with the keepers and the leapers. So the keepers are like, they're in it. They're enjoying they're there to have fun. The leapers may not be staying because they all are having fun everywhere. That's how I interpret it. They're going all over the place, right? They're like the life of the party. They're not necessarily going to stay in the culture. They're not a symptom of you. They're their own cause. And then the sleepers are disengaged. So I think, Ken, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to read into it too wrongly. He was making an argument that the pianist, the interaction between them and the sleepers had a relationship with the keepers. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, he engaged the sleepers between sets, talked to them. They all of a sudden now they felt a connection with the person on stage at the next set, and their energy level would start to come up, and then everybody's energy level would start to come up, you know. He said the problem if you engage the leapers too much is that if they're going to be gone in about 25 minutes after their next drink. So you got your core people, you know, they're going to be there. You want to engage the sleepers because they're the people that are going to decide whether the night's a success or not.
oh, well, this something, but based on Joe's point earlier about defectors, we have, I would say we also have to try to figure out, are leapers those that shouldn't be here, or are sleepers those that shouldn't be here? Right? Because there could be leapers that appear the greatest, like you said earlier. They're your ride or die, and then boom, it changes. They're out. They're out of the bar.
Yeah, they're not keepers. They're leapers, and they're not your ride or die. They're not your 9. They're in the 80, and maybe some of them are in the 10 that shouldn't be there. I don't know, but I think you got to recognize that from an organizational standpoint, I think you need those people. You need they're important. Know that they're not going to be there for very long, but I think that you can create a much better environment by engaging the sleepers, by finding out what's going on, what's, you know, what could change what could shift the energy for them.
I wanted to ask you guys about, or Joe, you have anything to pin, you know, close
Joe,
that?
say piano player, please. Just say piano player.
Piano player. Yeah, that's how I was brought up, but I don't know. I play the piano.
I'd like to know selling the dream. We're on the 10th season.
Sure.
What have you guys learned? Because you came on the show last year about, or a little less than a year. What are some of the big takeaways over the last year doing the show? You know, having now millions of listeners and just so many great people. I'm sure a lot of our listeners want to do a podcast, and they don't. So I think it's a good reminder because you guys are really good at it.
Practice makes perfect, man. It's like anything else. Get your reps in. They're not all going to be perfect, but make sure the next one's better than the one before. And that's it. And that's, you know, there's this. It's not rocket science. It's trial and error. And
It's so much fun though. It's so much fun. That was my takeaway. Like before I was like, I was right doing it for love versus from love, Joe. Like I feel like that if we're going about this, from love, then it doesn't matter how many people listen, right? Like it's not about ratings or reviews or anything like that. Although that's how
Thank
you
God.
get a bigger.
What did you say?
I said, thank God.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it from love, then it's worth it. And I think that's the other thing that I took away. It is worth it. It felt trivial at first, like we were just kind of scratching an itch, to use analogies, but no, it feels worth it now. We're having fun. We're talking to some very interesting people, and if 6, 7, 8, 9 people listen, and one person gets one thing out of it, then because it came from love, then bam, that makes it all worth it, and that's encourages me and Joe to want to do more episodes, because we know that it's coming from that proper place.
One of the things too that I've noticed is that this is a skill that, this is a practice that most adults don't get to do. Most men, to be sexist, like specifically, like to be able to talk about stuff, man. Like, Jay, you're in a world like you do it all the time, but I don't think you realize, like, you go try to have a conversation with a guy that doesn't talk about stuff other than maybe sports every now and then or whatever. And it's like, it's sometimes painful. So like to develop, just to be able to do that and be able to talk, what's that word? Extraneously off the top of your head,
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
Yeah. So to be able to do that, like that's a skill that requires practice. And like the more that you do it, the better you get at it, the more your thoughts are collected and you're not, and it spills into everything else where, and it makes you, when I started in sales long time ago, I'll give a shout out. Chuck Yatsko took me on a ride day, my very first ride day. And he said, he said, when you get good at sales, he said, you're going to become a really good listener. And I didn't know, I'm out of college. I'm like, dude, like I'm going to,
Joe said, what?
These guys. He's like, it'll make your relationship with your girlfriend or your wife or better, because like, you become better at hearing the other side and then preparing a response based on actually listening. And that's what, for our podcast and things like that, it's helped me become a better conversationalist, but definitely helped me become a better listener. Because if you don't listen and then you say something, and then you listen back to the podcast, you're like, dude, I'm such an idiot. Like I didn't even hear what he was saying. I was so fixated on squeezing this point in that I sound like a moron. Like, why would anybody, I sound like a jerk because I didn't listen. So then you start catching yourself. You're like, oh dude, like pay attention. So that's been the greatest tool for me, is just to like, I don't like to listen back to them, like after we do them. But when I do occasionally, I'm like, man, I really missed what he was saying totally, because I wasn't listening. So that's helped me a lot.
I forced my kids to listen to the show on long drives, especially,
That's not
but
cool.
To Joe's point though, practice, the ability to practice as you get better at, as your anxiety comes down through practice, that's part of the reason why you're not so fixated on knowing what you're going to say next, because you're comfortable knowing that when the time comes, you'll know what to say. And sometimes we enter into these conversations early on. We're like, all right, I want to make sure I say this. I want to make sure I say that. I want to make sure I say that. And the show or the conversation can go in a totally different direction. And it is what it is. You just got to be able to roll with it. But the anxiety of allowing the conversation to go in a direction that you have no idea where it's going to go allows you to relax and listen, and that does make for a better conversation for sure.
Yeah,
I want to thank you guys, because this was my I wanted to, I didn't know where the quote would go. I want to be able to throw a quote out on a show and just no one even know what it's going to be, and then just see where it goes. And I thought today was really affirming for the first time that I'm trying this. What feedback do you have? Do you think that's a good idea, or how could we do it better? Because they're just basically told, oh, here's a quote. We're going to talk about it and then we went for like 40 minutes. I thought that was a huge win, but like, what could we, you think I should try that again?
I love it, man. And I think that you picked, I think that given your audience here, I think you picked a great quote because, we're, feel like we're in a war all the time, it's like, that's how we're sort of wired. So that speaks to me, those types of, in the trenches and the 80-20 rules and the laws of, sample size, you're gonna have this, that, like that's the math of life. That's you're not always gonna get 100 tens. And you have to, but kind of dovetailing into what we're just saying about listening and so forth, that's where you become the one. And like to Ken's point, like when you're one of the 10 and you're focused on being so great, one of the 10, the second you break out of that and you start listening and looking around at the other 9 and how can I help them get better, that's when you become the one. So in our podcast and our conversations, like everyone is so, how do I get my point across? I want people to hear what I'm saying. And that's great. And you can be a wonderful podcaster. You can have incredibly intelligent things to say. But when you break into the one, when you're like, all right, I want to pull these gems out of other people. And the best way to do that is by listening. That's when you get to the next level. So to your question of people thinking about starting a podcast or anything like that, try to find the gems in the people that you have on the podcast, and you do that by listening. So you did a great job with the quote, because I think the quote is, personality type, falls right in line with how me and KJ operate.
I think that the other part of that is when you're eager to learn, that's another part. Like sometimes listening is it's also the prerequisite to learning. So you have to want to hear what the person has to say because it's going to teach you something. And that's why the downside to these conversations and why I can't wait to have you, Jay, back on Selling the Dream is because we're doing all the talking, right? And when I'm hosting a podcast, the best part about it is not the teaching, it's the learning. And I get to ask questions from a purely inquisitive place, and then I get to sit back and allow you to talk, and I learn so much that it's again, we talk about the reasons why we do it. That's one of the other reasons, and it's also one of the other reasons that makes it worth it. So it's a give and take, and as a podcast host, one of the reasons why we do two truths and a lie is because it like your quote, it gives us something to talk about, and then we could just sit back and let them do their thing.
Yeah, I think it's funny,
or go, sorry.
No, I was gonna just say that I believe when we had you on the podcast for the first time, because I watched that one back. That's one of my favorites. I think you thought I was just eye candy for a minute. I think we got to the end, we were like 35 minutes later, like, what's up with this guy Joe? And I was like, I'm taking it all in, man. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid here, sponging it up.
Yeah, you
He's
listen
my attorney.
well.
Yeah, but that was, dude, it was so engaging, and like everything that you were talking about, I was just glued. I'm like, I'm just listening. I don't have anything. I don't even want to talk. I don't want to derail this conversation with some dumb interjection that I have. I would really want to learn what this guy's got to say. And it was great. So that's the benefit of being on the other side of it, where we don't have to talk. Like this one, we're doing all the talking because you're asking the questions, but like on the flip side of it, it's great to let somebody just go and be like, man, what's this guy got to say? So,
well, I want to affirm that because I think that dynamic between the both of you, I felt so comfortable as a guest. a lot of times I don't, and that it created buy-in. You know, I'm bought into the show. Whatever I can do to help, it makes me feel good to help something that I think is great, that is being led by people that are capable and bought into it. So it's an interesting thing to unpack, even, right? If we listen again, like, because we're all consumers at some level, and we at a culture naturally emerged in a sense.
Sure.
I was going to ask you guys about this, like that dichotomy of like, what, you know, in one medium we're talking, in another we're listening. You think I should try longer episodes too? Like, in the beginning, I would do these 3-hour ones, but it was just an interview because it was like overly prepared. But like, what about bringing back longer form? Like, is that a way to get it so it's not just one-sided almost too, in some contexts? Because, you know, when it's short, there's a lot of things I want to ask you guys because I haven't seen you in a while. Like, we have an hour, right? So it could be lopsided. You think I should extend the time?
You know, I always, because we go back and forth with this too, and it's like I hate cutting off conversation when they're flowing, and a lot of times we'll get done and be like, all right, cool, man, that was good. And then our guest, we'll just start talking about stuff. Be like, shit, dude, like, why didn't we
Yeah.
talk
We
about
could
this?
have
Like,
had
this is the
this
best
could have been
stuff.
part
Like,
of the
oh,
show.
this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
gold, bro. Like, so
Well,
yeah,
the
I
other
mean,
thing is,
that's the
Joe,
part.
when the recording button goes off, all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'm back. And then we're having much more real
Right.
conversations. And that I want, my goal for our show is to try and really bring those two worlds together where the record button doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
I love what we say before the recording. I love the time we have after the recording. And I want to bring those worlds together. And maybe a longer episode is the way. I think that you fear awkward silence, you fear going off the rails. Maybe one of your guests is going to get off into a political rabbit hole. Who knows? Like, if you're not somewhat,
Yeah.
steering the ship. But I think that this kind of content, it all depends on your listener and how they consume it. I've listened to 2-hour episodes on Joe Rogan, and I've turned off half-hour episodes 10 minutes in, on some other podcast because I just wasn't engaged. So, if the person wants to hear what we have to say, they'll listen till the very end. If they don't, then they'll listen for 15 minutes.
There's also not to interrupt, but like,
Joe wasn't listening to me. He had something.
no, I was listening, but I before I forgot this point, I wanted to say this, but there's also like you can edit, you know what I mean? We can record for 3 hours and take the greatest hits and squeeze it into a half hour. You know what I mean? So like
Mm.
like having a finite start finish is really difficult, been difficult for us because of that point. What KJ's saying is like, dude, like we got to hear, oh, I wanted to talk about this and then talk about this, but I have a whole file of conversations that we've had when they stopped recording that I'm going to use one day in case I ever get in trouble. There's about 20 people that I have some sound bites on.
That's
There's
awesome.
the new Diddy.
So, exactly.
Well, you guys have inspired me. I think there's some experimentation that's going to go on to do longer form, because I think that's part of what will help is the longer it goes, and maybe just be a bit more open on my end to share, because I really was rigidly in interview. I've been growing through this process of having this show, right? Even sharing this right now is this consequence of me as a host, as a student, growing through having a show.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to the first 10 seasons, it very much is a Charlie Rose or a Barbara Walters or a, insert host interview. And I'm trying to figure out how to integrate myself where we don't have to do 2 separate podcasts to get me.
Talking.
I want to do one podcast, and so I don't think I'm alone in that integration. But that's where I'm at, and so That's why I asked the question. It's helpful affirmations, like maybe choose some longer ones, because we go 2 hours in. You may have questions. I'll have questions again. And I mean, we went 45 minutes just on that quote. It was like, all right, that's cool. I want to bring those in because, I'm bringing up these quotes in the beginning of the show. And organically, people have said, hey, repeat that quote. And then we might spend, it's like, because I always like to pick the quote based on my feeling of the people. So then that could be like, who knows? I don't want to put constraints on how long that could be. Because the great ideas come absolutely unbeknownst to us.
Yeah. And if you cut it off, I mean, I've listened to a bunch of ways to end a podcast. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us today. Or I've heard your endings where, it's just at the end of a thought, all of a sudden the music starts playing. So yeah, if you ran long and you're like, you know what, I think that kind of, we lost a little bit of steam there. You can cut it out. But I think you should engage more from a conversational standpoint, Jay, because again, you're not Charlie Rose interviewing, a great actor. Like Charlie Rose has nothing to contribute to a conversation with Robert De Niro, right? But in these conversations, you have a lot to contribute, and I think you should be eager to.
That is a good point.
Thanks for the feedback, and I'm sorry that you're not Robert De Niro.
So am I.
Yeah, no, I don't like that guy. That guy can...
he's all right.
In closing, I'd like people to follow you guys. So, selling the dream. Can you spell that? I'm just kidding. Using the sentence. How do people subscribe? They go to Apple,
Spotify, and check out our episodes. And you can, leave a review. I'm starting to do that now. Ask for the reviews because I know that's important feedback for us. Yeah, even if it's a bad review, I don't care. Like I truly am all about the feedback now because that's how you get better. Yeah, check it out and tell a friend.
Don't listen to the ones that aren't good. If it's not good, just skip to the next one. They get better. And then they get worse, and then they get better, and then they get worse. So they're not all created equal. So if you hear one and you don't like it, listen to the next one. You might not like that one, but you might like the one after that. So that's my advice.
If you're listening to this podcast, follow these two, subscribe to their podcast, Selling the Dream. Leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast. Send me, I'm just make a stupid joke. Thanks for listening to the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time.